Two in a row for the Pacers. Rare to say this season. They beat the Pelicans in a way harder than expected game to get to 8-10. And the story was Tyrese Haliburton shining again. Much to discuss on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Tuesday and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, much to discuss from Pacers Pelicans. The second straight Pacers win, their first win on the second night of a back-to-back this season. Still probably a little too difficult than it needed to be. They were crushing early. Looked like they might have their first convincing win and then kind of stumbled the rest of the way. But the final score is what they care about, given how bad their start to the season was. And the final score said the Pacers had more points, 114-110. The final score, a lot to get to from this one. Tyrese Haliburton, wow. That was last year's Tyrese Haliburton for the second, maybe third time this season. Dominant performance. They do not win without him. They don't even get close without him in this game. We got to get to him in great detail. We will lead with him. A lot of Quinton Jackson coming today. Great performance from him, and I've been very impressed with him filling in as a starter. And this game in particular was the perfect opportunity for him to shine, and much more from this game as the Pacers get to 8-10. And I got an anecdote about an 8-10 team from last year that you'll want to hear today. But the star of the show and the star of the Pacers in this game, Tyrese Haliburton. Amazing performance. His second best of the season in this game. Absolutely terrific game for all four quarters. Tyrese Haliburton finishes with 34 points on 23 shots, made 9 threes. To put in, first of all, 9 threes, full stop, impressive right there, right? His other great game this year against New York, he made 4 threes, right? 9 threes for Tyrese Haliburton in this game. Then Pelicans made 9 as a team. Like, Tyrese Haliburton's 2 highest made 3-point games combined this season was 9 entering the night. He made 9 just today. Awesome shooting night for a guy who's been in a huge slump from deep all season. Goes 3 for 5 on twos, made his only free throw. 13 assists, 3 rebounds all in the first quarter. 3 steals. Continues to be in the passing lanes this season. 2 turnovers. And, of course, most importantly, in a 4-point win, plus 16. Even on games he hasn't been as good this year, he still has a strong impact in that way. Tonight, he was good and still had that strong impact. The Pelicans were terrified of him, and they couldn't stop him. Tyrese Haliburton was just sensational. 34 points, his second most of the season, only behind the New York Knicks game, where he was also sensational and had 35. 13 assists, tied for his second most of the season behind that New York Knicks game, where he was sensational at 14. This game was just a tiny bit different than that one to me, for a major reason. I mean, that Knicks game, the Pacers scored 132. They looked great. They got back to 500. But they had other guys who were huge in that game. Myles Turner had 26. Ben Mathurin had 38. Siakam was his typical metronome, doing good on the glass. TJ McConnell made 50% of his shots. Not that those guys weren't good in this game. The Pacers had other decent performances from other players. Turner shot it very well and had a podium game. Moses Brown chipped in. Like, they had good nights from other players. I don't want to diminish that. We'll talk about those guys later. But Myles Turner had 17. That was the Pacers' second leading scorer tonight. Siakam was fine with 14. He did a lot of other things, but they needed Haliburton to be sensational on offense in this game. Not the next game, they needed him to be pretty good, and he was sensational. This game, they needed him to be sensational, and he was. And the 3-point attempts and the shooting in particular is going to be the standout thing to me. He had not taken more than 11 in a game all season. He took 18 today. He earned every heat check he took. And he made a bunch of them. That is huge for the Turner, for a potential. I mean, obviously he has not earned like, oh, it's turning around, but the potential turnaround of his season would look like that. A game where he finally looked confident enough to just completely let it fly. And the Pelicans could not put the right player on him. They were super banged up. Like, to be clear, just like Sunday's game, this is not a high quality win. Very banged up Pelicans team. And Elfrid Payton and Yves Missi were giving the Pacers fits all night. Elfrid Payton was amazing, former Mad Ant in this game. Yves Missi was amazing. But Haliburton made sure they would not lose. And the Pelicans and who they had available, Trey Murphy is like a good player. You know, he was plus 14. Like, he can kind of defend, but he's not that shifty side to side. And other than that, they don't have a ton of good perimeter defensive talent on that team. So it's hard for the Pelicans already to put a good matchup on Haliburton to really slow him. He actually got into the lane a lot tonight, too. A lot of his passes were getting through the man, watching the defense rotate and finding the guy behind the play. But because of that, they tried to trap sometimes. They tried to switch sometimes. So when they got bigs on Haliburton, Daniel Tice, ex-Pacer, got switched on a few times. That did not go particularly well. Those plays he punished in ways that he hasn't all season, right? Not hasn't all season, but hasn't for most of the season. A big issue has been his inability to create separation some nights. Tonight, that was completely not noticeable to me. In this game, he would skate past his defenders into the lane and then throw a no-look to Siakam or behind the back in the paint or in the clutch, an absurd lob to Ben Mathurin. Like he had tight angle passes that were tough. That was what last year's Tyrese Haliburton looked like, right? Breaking down a defense to set someone up with a highlight or hit the right cutter at the right time or just make a defense go, oh, crap. And a lot of that comes from him being just very smart with the passing. He would have had 13 assists even if he didn't shoot really well, obviously. But when he's hitting the threes, you have to guard him so much differently. We've known this for forever, right? But in this game, you saw it, that the Pelicans were like, oh, crap. You know, here comes a screen. Okay, he's going around the screen. We got to run up and get on him. Someone else becomes open, like immediately from all that. Absolutely terrific game from Tyrese Haliburton to punish this. What the Pacers need is for this to continue to be a trend. We're not at trend level yet. You know, this season is fairly young, but they just played the Bucks, right? Last Friday. And I bring up that game because in the second half of that game, Tyrese Haliburton was 4 for 7, including 4 for 6 from deep with 12 points and 5 assists. 2 days later, they played the Wizards. He played pretty well against the Washington Wizards. Malcolm Brogdon. I'm looking at the Wizards box score. Tyrese Haliburton against the Wizards, 5 for 11 from deep, 21 points, 9 assists. So if you smash the second half of the Bucks game and the Wizards game together, that is 9 for 17 for Haliburton from 3. Then you toss in this 9 for 18 game. That's 18 for 35 across his last 5 halves or 10 quarters of play. That's excellent. That is 2.5 games of extended, oh, wow, he's shooting, and they're playing better kind of stuff. And they won those games. They didn't play great in the 2 wins, and they played better in the loss. But that is probably the longest sustained run of like, that's good Haliburton play we've seen this season, right? He had the really good passing stretch after the Philly game when he had 2 assists. He had a really nice passing stretch, but had, you know, a 2 for 8 game in there. He was 1 for 6 from deep. He was 2 for 10 from deep against Boston, although he was okay in that game. After the Knicks game, he had 3 decent scoring games, but not super efficient, and the passing wasn't there in one of them. 4 assists in Toronto, for example. This might be, you could argue, I think probably the answer is yes, the best consecutive run of 2.5 games he's had this season. Still work to do to call it a turning point, obviously, but the way he's really opened up about how he's worked through the start of the season, the way his teammates have been boosting him, the fact that they're playing some crummy teams at home, which they needed this so bad. This is why I talked about the schedule so much before the season and before the stretch happened, because if this is what it takes to turn around his season is some low-quality opponents that he can do well against and get some confidence and look like himself in the process, that's huge for the Pacers. So it wasn't necessarily anything about this game that was like, oh, they changed something, and that's how they can unlock Tyrese Haliburton, right? I don't think he should take 18 threes every game. But if they're playing teams that just can't guard him, he can still chuck and go crazy. And if those teams decide they do want to find a way to guard him, he can just distribute like a madman. 13 assists was phenomenal on a night he had that kind of scoring output. And on a night that the Pacers only had 114, to have him score 34 and add 13 assists, which is at a minimum 26 assist points, it's way more than that in actuality. He basically created, not even basically, he created over half their offense by himself. That's what he was last year. He was that kind of player. So the key takeaway from this game is Tyrese Haliburton looked incredible, and he looked like last year's guy in how he was moving. He was able to create space for himself, and when he got past defenders, he was able to hit cutters and keep the Pacers offense popping and humming and moving, and he took over in the clutch in a way that was really important. This game was somehow, Pacers could not close out this Pelicans team. This game was somehow tied with about 3.5 minutes to go at 104 with 3:20 to go. Haliburton hits a 3. Haliburton driving finger roll. They go up 3 and never look back, right? That was clutch baskets. He's done that all season. He also then assisted Ben Mathurin for an alley-oop dunk with a minute to go. Absurd pass. The highest risk possible. I couldn't believe he threw it. It was a very risky pass. Could have been a turnover. Shout out to Ben Mathurin for getting up and getting it. He did not have a great game, but that was a huge play. And then TJ McConnell put it away at the foul line. Their entire offense, until they had to play the free throw game at the end, after the game was tied with 3.5 minutes to go, was Tyrese Haliburton. That was his kind of saving grace for a lot of the season, is even on his bad nights, he was still pretty reliable in the clutch. Now, he had a spectacular game and was clutch, similar to the Knicks game. That was his second best game of the season, but the difference was the last time he had a game like this, they had other guys step up and they scored 132, and maybe that's better from a team performance perspective, but they didn't need him to be spectacular to win. They needed him to be great to win, and he was spectacular. Tonight, the Pacers needed Tyrese Haliburton to be spectacular to win, and he was spectacular. Awesome performance. Someone used the word vintage, which made me die laughing. Like, he's 24. Does vintage exist yet? But I get the point of what that's saying. He was terrific, and that's great. Full stop, that's great. But the question for the Pacers is, what does it take for this to keep happening? Obviously, 34 and 13 every night is impossible, right? Like, that he'd win MVP. But what does it take to get him closer to this level as often as possible? You're not going to play the Pelicans every night, but what does it take as a team to unlock him like this? Self-creating threes is huge. Creating threes for others is huge. They needed this win so bad and got it despite, again, not playing particularly well, but a superhero performance from their star. Got it done. Other guys were huge. Two guys in particular I want to highlight in segment 2 here. Myles Turner late and Quinton Jackson for the whole 48. Then some not so good stuff at the end as we continue here on Locked On Pacers. Before we get to any of that, though, I want to talk to you about the great people over at BILT. PSA for anyone who rents. If you haven't heard of BILT, you are about to thank me. Earning points on rent is now a reality when you pay your rent through BILT. You don't even have to check with your landlord to start earning points that can be used towards flights, hotel stays, fitness classes, and even your next rent payment. Let me break it down for you. There is no cost to join BILT. As a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and your everyday spending. BILT points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties you can redeem your BILT points towards. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only BILT members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA to start earning points on your rent payment today. Also need to quickly tell you guys about Robinhood Gold, because with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen should be Locked On Pelicans. Jake Madison will take you through the other side of this from the Pelican side. He had a great show the day before this game on Zion Williamson, who had a lot of stuff going on that I didn't even know about, besides the whole switching agencies thing that we did know about with injuries and a video about tattoos or something. Well, I didn't know about any of this. Jake Madison has got it all on Locked On Pelicans. Absolutely crushes covering that team, who was super banged up. And 2 games in a row where the Pacers, look, I said this yesterday, I'll say it again. Given that they started 6-10, and a reminder, last year when they were on 47 games, they did not have a single 16-game stretch where they went 6-10. All of them were 7-9 or better, right? Bad start. They care more about the result than the play. Right now, they need the wins very badly, and they're 1 win away from this being a successful homestand to me and 2 away from it being great, obviously. But if I think they hoped that, and they still could get there. Like, they've had good stuff happen during these 2 wins, that they would show a lot of progress from a process perspective. And I honestly think tonight their offense was like humming more than it has. I think a lot of that's Haliburton being an identity guy, but they're still not playing great. They are just squeaking out the win. So that's something to monitor in these next 2. And they play Portland in Detroit is, can they look better for 48 minutes? They had a good bench game and not a good Haliburton game, and then a good Haliburton game. You get what I'm saying, but still, such is life. Something I want to throw in before we get going on some other guys I want to talk about. Pacers now 8-10, a team I've been keeping an eye on. Just not saying that the Pacers will have this happen to them, but a lot of people are so doom and gloom about a 6-10 team, and like, I get it, you should be. That's a fifth of the season. 20 games is usually my benchmark for like, okay, what's going on? Let's really dive into the numbers, and they're very close to that and being a 500 team at best. I wanted to look back last year and say, were there any teams that started this bad that really exploded out of it? And the bad part is, the answer is not very many, right? Like, if you are through 20, 15, 10 games, whatever, kind of mediocre, that might just be who you are. And the Pacers, with their injuries and their condensed schedule because of their pair strip and all this stuff, maybe this is just who they are, is going to be some 40 to 45 win team. The team that I think people who are really optimistic about this group, and they still haven't played very well, and they're 8-10, would point to is last year's Clippers. And I know everyone's kind of squinting and going, huh? That team lost the first round. Yeah, that's true. But that team was 4-7 early in the season, maybe even 4-8. They did not start very well. They were 6-8 as of 2 days ago, but a year ago. So the 24th, 2023. And they were 8-10 last year, which is the current Pacers record. That was on November 30th. They were 8-10, right? So they did not start well. They started 4-7. That was correct. And by February 6th, they were in sole possession of first place in the West. They obviously clicked and went crazy in that stretch, but like, it did happen. It is possible for teams to turn it around early. So not saying that's going to happen to the Pacers, but just remember, we've seen a team very recently, extremely recently even, have this happen. So the Pacers, that's why the process is important to me, because if they're going to have a run like that, they need to play better and get wins, not just get the wins, although they'll take the wins, certainly. So 8-10, big contributors in this game beyond Tyrese Haliburton. One, Quinton Jackson. Got a little bit of journalist luck today, because I asked Rick Carlisle about Quinton Jackson before the game. So I think very interesting about him to me was, and you guys heard me say this before Summer League, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I did think he was way better than the fan base did, and said so before Summer League. He played for the Mad Ants last year, obviously. He was kind of a combo guard, playing with Elfrid Payton, ironically, who was just cooking for the Pelicans tonight. But he had the ball a lot and was asked to drive a lot and create, and he scored a bunch. He scored over 20 points a game for the Mad Ants last year on a two-way deal. And now the Pacers and Rick Carlisle saying, hey, you're going to be the fourth or fifth option with the starters, right? For a guy who I don't know his entire background. It's not like I was diving into Texas A&M Quinton Jackson film, but for a guy who, my perception of him with the NBA and the G League has had the ball a pretty good amount. To go from that to them being like, hey, go defend and be the fifth option, that's a hard transition. And he's done a wonderful job in that role. He was 0-for-5 against the Wizards, certainly, but he does not look out of place very often in that role. And he's a two-way contract player playing like his 25th NBA game or something. It's been very impressive to me. So I asked about him before the game, and that sort of what stood out about that shift, because that can be challenging. He's doing something totally different and doing very well. So tonight, after I asked that, I got very lucky that he played that role, and they said, hey, you're guarding CJ McCollum. He guarded Damian Lillard last Friday, right? Like, they're putting him on tough assignments because they have to. They literally have to. He is probably one of their better guard defenders. He had moments on Brogdon and Koulibaly the day before. He was 24 points in Houston. He's played well. I mean, I don't have to explain it to you if you've watched the games. This is a two-way contract player starting. He started more games this year than TJ McConnell did last year. And the Pacers were really healthy last year. And they're not at all healthy this year. But like, that already shows how often they needed him. Tonight, he was awesome. Awesome in that role. Right? The 24-point game is obvious why he was good. He scored a bunch of points. 32 minutes for Quinton Jackson today. Already more than they ever thought they'd need from him in a game this year. 4 threes, and I swear, this might not be accurate. I'll try to run through the play-by-play while I run through this. I swear all of them were like the most, the Pacers really needed that. Like, it just became a close game, and they really needed a triple, and then he just drilled it. Like, it felt like they were all really important threes too. So the 12 points that he gave them were really important. His first 3 came when the Pelicans cut it to 8 in the second quarter. Earlier in that quarter, they had it a little closer than that. Not as important as I remember. The second time he hit a 3 in this game, the Pelicans took a lead. CJ McCollum scored right before it. Quinton Jackson 3, Pacers go up 2. Then CJ McCollum hits a 3, and Quinton Jackson hits another 3 to put the Pacers back up by 2. Obviously, a very huge sequence there to stabilize the Pacers as they gave up the lead in that quarter. And then his three in the fourth quarter came with 6 minutes to go, and they were up 96-95, 1 point. So 3 of the 4, I was correct. The timing of them was just huge. I mean, they desperately needed buckets in those moments, and they got it from a two-way contract player starting his 4th ever time. He was awesome on offense. Obviously, just highlighted a stretch where McCollum got him twice. CJ McCollum had 23 points on 20 shots. Good defense there. They outscored the Pelicans by 13 with McCollum out there. Really great Quinton Jackson game. 4 assists, no turnovers, plus 19 for a two-way contract guard playing like kind of 2, kind of 3, really needing him to be good. He's really been impressive in this stretch. Not even just compared to expectations, although that's certainly true. I've said this before. If a two-way contract player contributes in 1 win, they have more than helped with their season expectations. Now, like 2 or 3 wins, Quinton Jackson's been in the rotation and helping. So big stretch for him. Really dates back to, I think, Charlotte was the first time he was playing a lot. He's been important for this Pacers team, and tonight was like the best possible version of it with decent defense, good shooting, not messing up moving the ball. Just kind of fits, and they really like him as a person, which matters a good deal. The other player who I thought was huge in this game, although it took him a while to get going, was Myles Turner. Myles Turner had a calf injury before this game, sore calf, and played. And here's the deal. You all can eye roll at this. I give you all permission to eye roll, right? Myles Turner, first of all, he said he wanted to play. A lot of guys don't sometimes want to play in the NBA. He wanted to play. Okay, great. I think the Pacers would have been totally just to hold him out. Calf injuries can be devastating. McDermott was 6 weeks last year. Giannis missed an entire playoff series against the Pacers. Kristaps Porzingis missed a bunch of the playoffs. Calf injuries can be super long, and it was a sore calf. So that's part of it. The other part of it is they have no centers. If Myles Turner gets hurt, they are screwed. They're screwed. So I would have totally understood if they were like, we have to be cautious. It's a back-to-back. He didn't play in the back-to-back last week. So he played, and he had 2 fouls early, and they had to turn to Moses Brown. Shout out to Moses Brown for he's going to be called old and reliable the rest of the season. They needed Myles Turner to be good. The early fouls really hurt. And in the first half, he had 6 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist. They played fine in his minutes. He made 2 threes. He came alive in a major way in the second half. 5 made shots, 7 boards, a block, and a steal. 11.7 boards plus 12 in the second half was Myles Turner, who led the Pacers in minutes in the second half on a back-to-back with the calf thing. And foul trouble. He got to 5 with about 5 minutes to go. I was thinking, oh, this could be troublesome for the Pacers. They had to close with someone else. He avoided the 6th foul. That was huge. Fourth quarter, 7 points, 4 boards, plus 7. Really good Myles Turner game in the fourth quarter. He was super emotive and passionate. He had 2 dunks in a row and then an and one on the following possession. That 7-point stretch was huge because the game was still teetering in the balance a lot in the second half. I thought that was really critical from him. And in the middle of that stretch, there was a play where he was defending a pick and roll, and all of a sudden behind him, someone just totally messed up the rotation. I couldn't tell who it was. It might have been Siakam. It might have been Jarvis Walker. Either way, wide open player in the basket. Myles Turner was mad. He was mad. And he explained it after the game that, when he messes up, the players say, hey, you messed up, and they tell him, so he wanted to tell them. He really wanted this win, and he was great in the fourth quarter on both ends, getting the Pacers established defensively. And once they got a few stops in a row in that stretch where Jackson was hitting those threes that I described not too long ago, they took off and they went from, man, they can barely get ahead or it's tied or the Pelicans are up 2 to, oh, they're up 7 with 5 minutes to go. They should be able to win this. And they gave away that whole 7-point lead, but they did win. And that stretch was huge. And Myles Turner and Quinton Jackson were huge parts of that. With Haliburton's great like that, they just need a few starters and role players to be good. Those were the guys. They did it in unusual ways. In Turner's case, it was coming alive late on a back-to-back. In Jackson's case, it was his role. If they can continue to be good, that's huge for the Pacers. Huge win in that way, even though, again, not necessarily impressive given opponent quality. Some other stuff I want to get to from this game. More Moses Brown, injuries, and how it changed the rotation. Much more to come as we close out today's Locked On Pacers. Before we touch on any of that, we have to talk about Skims. We all wear underwear every single day. I have not switched up the type of underwear I wear in a very long time. And if you haven't heard, Skims now offers men's underwear. And I'm here to tell you, it is worth the hype. In high school, I was a boxer's guy. That was dumb because in college, I switched over to boxer briefs. And now I'm a briefs guy, and I can't switch back. And once I tried the Skims stretch brief, I don't think there's any going back. It's sleek, lightweight, super comfortable. Almost feels like you're wearing nothing at all. I'm still fully secure where it matters most. So trust me, when it comes to underwear, tried them all, even made a switch. Skims is the best way to do it with their brief. So shop SKIMS Mens at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey, select our show and the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever, also available at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Kristaps Porzingis returned for the Boston Celtics. John Corrales on Locked On Celtics. I'll have more on that. Just what the Celtics needed, another former All-Star, man. They weren't good enough yet. That's a big one. DeJounte Murray going to be back for the Pelicans. That's big, potentially coming up. I already told you to listen to Locked On Pelicans. So those should be your next listens to keep up with the NBA from the local experts here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Reminder, we have a newsletter now. If you're watching on YouTube, you can use the QR code to sign up. Hundreds of people have subbed, and very much, I could tell from the numbers, people like it, and they like the stuff in it and what to open it and read it. So you should be next. I promise getting this podcast in your inbox every day will be worth it for you. Plus so much more. Articles from other places, writing from 2 Locked On national writers that we hired, writing for me. It's great. Please, it's free, straight to your inbox. Okay, let's talk about some other stuff that stood out from this game in a good or bad way. Ben Mathurin, not a good night. Looked gassed. He had to play a ton. I think the rotation played a big factor here. Johnny Furphy out. He had an ankle injury, didn't play after playing last night. So they're running out of wings, right? They're already playing Quinton Jackson on the wing as a starter. That's already, a guard basically playing on the wing. Off the bench, they had Jarris Walker, and that's it. That's all the available wings for the Pacers at this stage. So 37 and a half minutes for Ben Mathurin. He had a 3 that didn't hit the rim at all. It just kind of grazed the net. He had another 3 that was so far right, it just clunked off the backboard. 12 points on 12 shots, not what you typically see from him, right? He typically gets the line so much that his floor of efficiency is so high. Was still good on the glass, had some steals, had some nice passes. An off night from him that I'm going to attribute to, man, was he asked to do a lot from a defending perspective. But, when last time Haliburton went crazy, they won that game because Ben Mathurin also went crazy. Tonight they won with Haliburton going crazy and Mathurin not in particular. But again, I feel like there's a reason that's fairly obvious for that, where he just looked totally gassed with the way his shot was so off. I think it was a legs thing, but he did have the play of the game with that dagger dunk late. He got up for that one. That was very impressive on that one. Moses Brown, I already talked about him and how I'm going to call him old reliable because, yeah, he's been with the Pacers for now a week, I believe, not even a week. 3 for 4 again. I think he was 3 for 4 in both of his first 2 games for 6 points, 2 boards, 3 turnovers, though. You can see the limitations. Certainly, I'm not saying that to say he's playing bad or anything, but you can just see why the situations he plays in will likely be like tonight when Turner has foul trouble or there's injuries. They did play him with Toppin, though. I thought that was a good decision. They had him with, I forget who at first a little bit, but then they went to Brown Toppin, and that kind of helped the bench group get going. And then the bench group fell flat on their face. This game, one thing that I thought was, if you're the Pacers, probably very disheartening. I've been saying all year, maybe in my head, this is just a made-up thing, but I think a turning point for me for the Pacers will be when they finally just kick someone's butt for 48 minutes. I think their best performance, start to finish in a game this year, is still in Dallas. They didn't win that game by a bunch or look like this dominant group. In fact, they only won by 7. But that game for 48 minutes, like they never had a stretch where I was like, man, they can't score at all, right? Or, they're totally incapable of getting a stop right now. Like they just were like ahead and in control and won. And I think that's their best 48 minutes of the season. They had a great 40 minutes against Boston and a lot of minutes against other teams, but never 48. I'm still waiting for them to have a game where they just dominate. And I thought it might be tonight when they were up 27-12 in the first quarter. They looked they were running away with it. Haliburton was playing great. They were defending really well. And then things changed. Steve Messi came in, Elfrid Payton got going, and all of a sudden it was a 4-point game, by the end of that quarter, and it was tight the whole rest of the way. In fact, after that 27-12 stretch, the Pelicans won the rest of the game by 11 points. The start really matters, similar to the Milwaukee game the Pacers lost last Friday. But I thought this could be the day that the dominant game from the Pacers came. Instead, it was really like a dominant 8 minutes to start it that mattered. That stretch was super critical for the Pacers in that way. And the bench couldn't sustain it. And they never really got that footing back from early in the game. And no one on the bench was particularly awesome in this one. A lot of up and down moments from all those guys. McConnell's energy is still huge, especially against the zones. But they needed exactly what they got from Tyrese Haliburton. They needed the role player contributions of Myles Turner and Quinton Jackson. Pascal Siakam is going to be rock solid every night. And that's enough to win. Those are the only 4 players who had a positive plus-minus for the Pacers in this game. And they looked like it on the floor. Sorry about that weird pause. My entire computer just decided to nuke itself. But hey, we'll finish this up. That's how the Pacers got to win. They beat the Pelicans. They're up to 8-10. 2 more easy home games coming, at least on paper, that they really need to take advantage of. I'll have the coverage of it all right here on the Locked On Pacers podcast as they close out the month of November. For more, I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East, and this podcast is there at Locked On Pacers. Plus, over on Blue Sky, posting different stuff that I tweet. Also at Tony R. East on there. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Back tomorrow with the guest. I believe it's locked up, but I'm not certain, so I'm not going to say anything. Should be great, though. Someone many of you locally in Indy will know very well. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.